911. That came out of the tragedy of 911 was that America came together. It was amazing to me that Democrats and Republicans could stand on the steps of the nation's capital and sing "God Bless America." It was amazing that our nation came together to rally and thank God for bringing us through that horrific and terrible situation. But the real question that stands before us a decade later, after the death of almost 3,000 Americans, after families have tried to put their lives back together again, what have we learned about ourselves, about others, and about God as we reflect on the events of 911? Did this event bring us closer to God? Does this event cause us to look at God as a sovereign God over all events? Or did 911 make us bitter, revengeful? Did 911 make us hateful against our Islamic brothers and sisters? Did 911 make us weaker? Or did 911 make us stronger? I believe, brothers and sisters, as we look at our passages today, I believe that we can find three things that 911 really should have taught us. Number one, I believe that 911 tells us that God stands against evil. Look at somebody and tell them, God stands against evil. Brothers and sisters, in Exodus chapter 14, we find that the nation of Israel had been in Egyptian bondage for over 400 years. You know the story of how God raised up Moses to be the leader to bring the nation of Israel out of Egyptian captivity. And now here in chapter 14, they were standing before the Red Sea. Now the children of Israel were in a very difficult situation. There was a deep blue sea on one side and a great enemy on the other. I don't know, brothers and sisters, if you've ever felt like you've been in a place that you were between a rock on the one hand and a hard place on the other. That's how the nation of Israel felt. They didn't know what to do. But I'm here to tell you, you may have been in a hard place in your finances. You may have been in a hard place in your career. You may have been in a hard place dealing with family circumstances. But how many of you know that God is the kind of God? I wish I had some witnesses. I know it's early in the morning, but is there anybody here that knows that God is the kind of God who brings us through? So God made a way out of no way. When we read the book of Exodus, we find that God called Moses to stretch out his rod. And God created a highway in the midst of a sea. Isn't that a blessing? God created a highway in the midst of a sea. Now some of y'all are looking at me like I'm crazy, but when you were sick and the doctor gave you that bad report, God created a highway that caused you to be healed. When your marriage was on the rocks and you didn't see how you were going to make it, God created a highway in your relationship. When your career was going south. Do I have any witnesses here? God created a highway to bring you through. But even though we are in God's will, and even though God has a purpose for our lives, it does not mean that evil will not pursue us. We look at the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. We look at it as an evil moment in our nation's But brothers and sisters, sometimes God takes evil things. Sometimes God takes terrible crisis situations to get our attention and to let us know that God is still in control. But what caused them to lose their moral high ground is that they participated in evil against innocent people. All right. They participated in evil that God does not and will not condone. And I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that anytime God's people are a victim of evil, we can rest assured that God will fight the battle. Now, God may not come when we want it. God may not come even when we think we need it. But I'm here to tell you that God will be right on time. Is there anybody here that's ever been in a situation when God showed up? Anybody here ever been in a situation when God showed out? Anybody here ever been in a situation when God brought you through? You know that it was nobody. Somebody say nobody. Nobody but the Lord. The nation of Israel could not stick their chest out because they didn't do it by themselves. It was nobody but God that opened up the sea. Nobody but God that drowned the Egyptians. Nobody but God that fought them out, fought them through, made a way, fought them over. Nobody but the Lord. So brothers and sisters, as we look at 911, 10 years later, we understand that God stands against evil. And then secondly, brothers and sisters, I believe that as we look back on 911, and as we focus on Matthew chapter 18 and verse 21, I believe very clearly that 911 teaches us that forgiveness is necessary to move on. Forgiveness is necessary to move on. Brothers and sisters, there are those who believe that war is the answer to every conflict. There are those who believe that war is the answer for every dilemma. But we found out in World War I that war was not the answer, because there was a World War II. We found out after World War II that we don't need to crush our enemies, Germany and Japan, but we found out after World War II that if we don't want to have a World War III, then we need to help our enemies rebuild. And it was necessary for our nation to forgive. We have spent 10 years in Afghanistan, almost 10 years in Iraq. And brothers and sisters, the conditions that led to 911 really still exist. As long as there are haves and have-nots, there will be terrorism. As long as there is enmity between religions, believe it or not, there will be terrorism or the threat thereof. So brothers and sisters, we cannot